All right, everyone, welcome back to Talk Tickers. Usually we'd be like knee-deep in earnings calls, but today we're kind of switching gears a bit to cover some breaking news that has the entire market talking.
Definitely a change of pace, but trust me, this is one you won't want to miss.
I couldn't agree more. The headline is simple, yet mind-boggling. MicroStrategy, the software company, has just spent another $5.4 billion buying up 55,000 more Bitcoins.
Yeah, you just can't make this stuff up.
And here's where it gets really interesting, folks. MicroStrategy stock is actually down despite this news, and despite Bitcoin's recent surge, something just doesn't quite add up.
Right. There are a lot of layers to unpack here. Let's start with the sheer scale of this purchase. MicroStrategy now holds a whopping 386,700 Bitcoins, which is worth about $37.6 billion at current prices.
Wow.
To put that into perspective, they bought more Bitcoin this past November than in the previous 3 years combined. They acquired all of this at an average price of $56,761 per coin.
So what's the big takeaway here? What does this tell us about MicroStrategy's strategy?
Well, for starters, it shows their CEO, Michael Saylor, is putting his money where his mouth is. He's been a vocal Bitcoin evangelist for years, predicting it'll hit $13 million per coin by 2045.
Wow.
This move seems to signal they're doubling down on that belief, even as Bitcoin flirts with all-time highs, pushing past $90,000.
But how are they funding this massive buying spree? Surely they're not just breaking open the piggy bank for this.
Not quite. They've been utilizing a combination of methods. Recently, they issued $3 billion in convertible notes. Think of these as a type of loan where the lender has the option to convert the debt into company stock later on.
So they're essentially borrowing money to buy Bitcoin, hoping the bet pays off big time.
Exactly. But it's not just debt. They've also raised a significant amount, around $2.46 billion, by selling company stock.
Okay, so they're going all in on Bitcoin, using both borrowed money and funds from selling shares. But as we mentioned earlier, the stock isn't reacting the way you'd expect. Why is that?
Well, MicroStrategy's stock has become almost a mirror image of Bitcoin itself. Its price closely tracks the cryptocurrency's movements. Some analysts see this as a positive thing, claiming it gives investors a way to gain exposure to Bitcoin without directly holding the digital currency. But there's another side to this coin.
You mean like the fact that some analysts think this close tie to Bitcoin might actually be hurting MicroStrategy?
Exactly. Some critics, like the short seller Citron Research, are very skeptical of MicroStrategy's current valuation. They're essentially betting against the company's stock, arguing it's trading at an inflated price compared to the value of its Bitcoin holdings.
So they're saying this whole thing is unsustainable, like a house of cards waiting to collapse.
That's their take. They believe the market is overvaluing MicroStrategy because of the Bitcoin hype, and eventually this bubble will burst. Of course, not everyone shares this view. Bernstein analysts, for instance, are quite bullish on MicroStrategy.
Okay, so we've got Citron saying the sky's falling and Bernstein saying it's all sunshine and rainbows.
Help me understand what Bernstein sees that Citron doesn't.
Well, Bernstein believes that MicroStrategy's ownership of Bitcoin could grow from 1.7% of the circulating supply to a whopping 4% over the next decade. They see this as a long-term play, believing that being an early mover in the Bitcoin space will ultimately pay off for MicroStrategy.
So one group sees the ticking time bomb, the other a golden goose. Who's right?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It all boils down to your perspective on the future of Bitcoin itself.
It really does feel like we're witnessing a financial showdown in real time here. On one hand, you have MicroStrategy making this enormous bet on Bitcoin potentially shaping its future. On the other, you have these analysts with drastically different outlooks.
Yeah, it's high-stakes poker for sure, and the whole market is watching to see who's bluffing. So let's play devil's advocate for a moment. Let's say Citron is right, and this whole thing is built on shaky ground. What are the potential consequences for MicroStrategy, and more broadly, for Bitcoin itself?
Well, if their valuation truly is inflated and investor confidence wanes, their stock could plummet. That could force them to sell off some of their Bitcoin holdings, which could put downward pressure on the entire cryptocurrency market.
So a MicroStrategy crash could trigger a domino effect across the entire Bitcoin ecosystem. That sounds pretty scary.
It certainly has the potential to be disruptive, but let's not forget the other side of the coin. If Bitcoin continues to rise as Saylor predicts, MicroStrategy could be sitting on a gold mine. Their early and aggressive investment could pay off handsomely.
Okay, but let's go back to something you mentioned earlier. The fact that MicroStrategy stock is basically mirroring Bitcoin's price movements. That seems like a pretty risky proposition, right? I mean, Bitcoin is famous for its volatility.
Absolutely. It's a double-edged sword. If Bitcoin skyrockets, their stock could soar as well. But if Bitcoin takes a nosedive, their stock could crater. It's a high-risk, high-reward scenario for sure.
It makes you wonder what kind of safeguards MicroStrategy has in place to mitigate these risks. I mean, are they just crossing their fingers and hoping for the best?
Well, they've hedged their bets to some extent. They've taken out loans and issued bonds, locking in interest rates and giving them more financial flexibility. They've also been strategic in their stock offerings, raising capital when the market is favorable.
So they're not just blindly throwing money at Bitcoin, they're actually trying to manage the risks involved.
Exactly. But it's a tightrope walk. They're essentially betting that Bitcoin will outperform any potential losses they might incur from their debt and stock dilution.
This whole thing is so complex and fascinating.
Yeah.
It really highlights how MicroStrategy's gamble is intertwined with the fate of Bitcoin itself.
It's a symbiotic relationship for sure. One can't really succeed without the other. It's like they're two ships sailing in uncharted waters, their destinies linked together.
Okay, let's shift gears for a moment and indulge in our This Is Not Financial Advices segment.
Yeah.
You know the drill, folks. This is all purely hypothetical and for entertainment purposes only.
We are not financial advisors, and we definitely don't want anyone making investment decisions based on our ramblings.
Precisely. So given all that we've discussed about MicroStrategy and Bitcoin, what's our outrageous but plausible trade idea for today?
Well, we've talked about the potential for MicroStrategy stock to decouple from Bitcoin's price. So how about this? We short MicroStrategy, but simultaneously go long on Bitcoin and the entire crypto market.
Okay, let me make sure I understand this. We're essentially betting that MicroStrategy's stock is overvalued and will fall, even if Bitcoin and the overall crypto market continue to rise.
Exactly. We're trying to capture that potential gap between the hype surrounding MicroStrategy and the underlying performance of Bitcoin.
It's a bold move, that's for sure. But what are the potential risks involved?
Well, if Bitcoin and the crypto market tank, we'll be hurting on both sides of the trade. And if MicroStrategy's stock somehow manages to stay coupled with Bitcoin's rise, we'll lose on the short position.
So the high risk, high reward play as usual. But hey, that's what makes this segment so much fun. But seriously, folks, don't try this at home. This is just a thought experiment, not a financial recommendation.
Absolutely. Always do your own research and consult with a professional before making any investment decisions.
All right, on that note, let's take a moment to really consider the big picture here. What does MicroStrategy's gamble say about the future of money and finance? Welcome back to Talk Tickers for the final stretch of our deep dive into MicroStrategy's wild ride into the world of Bitcoin.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? Analyzing a software company's all-in bet on a digital currency. It's definitely not your typical earnings call breakdown.
Not at all. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the sheer magnitude of their Bitcoin holdings to slashing perspectives of analysts who see them as either brilliant or reckless.
And of course, we couldn't resist throwing out a truly audacious trade idea just for kicks.
All right.
But remember, folks, this is not financial advice. Purely hypothetical for entertainment purposes only.
Absolutely. But all this speculation and analysis leads to a bigger question. What does MicroStrategy's gamble tell us about the future of money itself? Are we on the cusp of a financial revolution, or are we watching a speculative bubble about to burst?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? MicroStrategy's bet is essentially a high-stakes wager on the future of Bitcoin as a mainstream asset. If Bitcoin truly does become the future of finance, as Michael Saylor predicts, they'll be hailed as pioneers, visionaries who saw the potential before anyone else.
But on the flip side, if Bitcoin falters or if governments crack down on cryptocurrencies, MicroStrategy could be left holding the bag. Their stock price could plummet, and their bold strategy could backfire spectacularly.
Right. It's a gamble with massive upside and equally significant downside. But what's fascinating is how this one company's actions have sparked a conversation about the very nature of money. We're forced to confront the possibility that the financial systems we've known for centuries might be on the verge of a radical transformation.
And that's what makes this whole story so captivating. It's not just about numbers and charts. It's about ideas, about challenging the status quo, and about taking risks that could redefine the future.
Whether MicroStrategy ultimately succeeds or fails their story serves as a powerful reminder that the financial world is constantly evolving. It's a reminder that innovation often comes with uncertainty, and that those who dare to embrace the unknown might just reap the greatest rewards.
It's a story that's still being written, and we'll be watching closely to see how it unfolds. Thanks for joining us on Talk Tickers for this fascinating deep dive into MicroStrategy's Bitcoin bet. We hope this has given you a glimpse into the complexities and potential ramifications of this bold move.
As always, we encourage you to do your own research and draw your own conclusions.
Until next time, keep those tickers ticking.